Hebrews chapter 12 verses 18 and 19 and 22 to 24. You have approached Mount Zion. Jesus is the mediator of the new covenant. Brothers and sisters, you have not approached that which could be touched, and a blazing fire, and gloomy darkness, and storm, and a trumpet blast, and a voice speaking words such that those who heard begged that no message be further addressed to them. No, you have approached Mount Zion, and the city of the living God, the heavenly Jerusalem, and countless angels in festal gathering, and the assembly of the firstborn enrolled in heaven. And God the judge of all, and the spirits of the just made perfect, and Jesus, the mediator of a new covenant, and the sprinkled blood that speaks more eloquently than that of Abel. Remember when Cain murdered Abel? Abel was an innocent man who was faithfully doing the will of God. Cain had put himself in danger of death at the hand of God in retaliation for Abel's death. Murder is the killing of another person without justification or excuse, especially with malice aforethought or with recklessness manifesting extreme indifference to the value of human life. Cain and Pilate had a lot in common. Cain and Pilate's similarities: pride. Cain felt God considered Abel's offering more valuable than his own. Pilate viewed Jesus as a threat to his power. Jealousy. Cain felt that Abel was held in higher esteem by God. Pilate's subjects held the religious leaders in higher esteem than Pilate. Fear. Cain was afraid God would find out about the murder. Pilate feared a revolt would break out and Rome would find out about it and remove him from his position of authority. Authority. Cain was the oldest to the two and thus had authority over Abel. Pilate was appointed to have authority over the Jews. Cowardice. Cain failed to admit his guilt for spilling the blood of his innocent brother. Pilate failed to stand up for an innocent man. Today's reading is an Old Testament versus New Testament comparison. The symbols and events alluded to in today's reading came from Exodus 19 verses 9 to 25. You will recall that Moses and Aaron were granted the privilege of ascending Mount Sinai to speak with God. Mount Sinai was considered sacred, so sacred that when even the elders or animals who stepped on the mountain when God was speaking with Aaron and Moses would die. You see, everyone, including Moses, was terrified. They lived in fear of God and his actions. Moving on to verses 22 to 24, we see a shift from the fear of Mount Sinai to the joy of Mount Zion, the heavenly Jerusalem. There is a glorious picture of heaven with a feast, the firstborn in heaven, God the judge and all of its angels and the spirits of men made perfect. The spirits of the just made perfect. Here we have another confirmation of the church's position on purgatory. Made perfect indicates that they were imperfect but later became perfect. This is a very different scene from that on Mount Sinai. The reader moves from fear to joy and then to hope. What we believe about our future affects how we think about the here and now. The Hebrews, the new Christians, no longer lived in Old Testament legalistic fear, coming from Mount Sinai, but, instead in the New Testament, a hopeful time of a loving Father, and a heavenly home on Mount Zion, the city of the living God, or the heavenly Jerusalem. The old law taught us to do God's will, which is so vital to our spiritual lives that it is a precept or commandment of the church. Why do we worship on Sunday when the Sabbath or day of worship in Judaism was traditionally on Saturday? When the church began, it was made up of people who had practiced Judaism, thus they went to the synagogue on Saturday and then worshipped as Christians in their home or domestic churches on Sunday. Sometimes, Sunday is called Little Easter, which recalls the day Jesus rose from the dead. Our weekly participation in the Mass out of duty and fear is pointless because God already knows what is in our hearts. The New Covenant asks us to do God's will out of love, not fear. We demonstrate on a day-to-day, moment-to-moment basis our faith by leading virtuous lives and struggling to imitate the life of Christ.